Movie trailers exist for one reason: to get your butt in a cinema seat by any means necessary. And it's that by any means mentality that can sometimes result in studios taking a few underhanded alleyways to lead us to the cinema as quick as possible. By this, I mean that they lie to you. Sometimes it can be blatant and horrible, where they include scenes that simply aren't in the final film, but others, as is the case of the entries on this list, well, they can only be described as trolling their prospective audiences. These are the trailers that played us, that either for noble or greedy purposes had its laughs at our expenses, and are tales of studios releasing hype packages that kept audiences in the dark. Some of these worked, and well, let's have a chat. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 movie trailers that totally trolled audiences. Number 10. Star Wars: The Last Jedi. The Star Wars sequel trilogy sure had its fun toying with fans through marketing, hasn't it? For example, the trailers for The Force Awakens slyly hyped up the return of Luke Skywalker, only for him to show up for a mere minute-long cameo at the very end. Then, The Last Jedi employed sneaky editing tricks to con people into believing that Rey would turn to the dark side and join Kylo Ren. In the trailer, we see Kylo seemingly reach out to Rey as she states, "I need someone to show me my place in this." However, when the final film dropped, we saw that she was instead stating this to Luke, and that while Kylo does offer the chance to join him, there's zero implication that she actually will. Even this year's Rise of Skywalker seems to have its tricks on display once more, because that heel turn for Rey just looks like the biggest bait ever. I mean, my money is on it being a vision or a nightmare for sure, but then again, if they know that we're thinking this, that it's yet another trick, then maybe this time it is real. Oh God! Number 9. Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. If you were to go back and look at the trailers for Sweeney Todd, then you'd probably note the following: Johnny Depp's usual creepy gothic stylings, a layer of grime over everything, and of course, that this film would not be a musical. I mean, there's no singing in it, so why would you expect it to be all song and dance? Well, my friends, the trailer played you like a damn fiddle if you didn't already know that this was an adaptation of the smash hit theatre show, because the trailer is actually using the somewhat 14% of the film that's not all singing to sell you on why you should actually watch it. Furthermore, the trailer even mashed together some of the film's scant spoken dialogue to give the impression that it was a conventional narrative feature. As such, many were gobsmacked to find themselves sitting down for a musical within mere minutes of the movie starting. A bizarre marketing tactic if ever there was one, and it's a move that screams that the studio were possibly worried about how a musical would be received by the public. Number 8. Iron Man 3. It's time to dust off my favourite line from Iron Man 3 and say it with me, kids. My name is Trevor! Yes, it is time once more to chat about the most divisive Marvel movie ever, Iron Man 3, this time centering around how the film was marketed. The trailers for the threequel promised a darker, grittier movie than the prior two Iron Man films, focusing on Tony Stark basically banishing himself from home because he's incurred the wrath of the Mandarin. Or so he and the audience is led to believe. I say this because the trailers emphasize Kingsley's role in the film, and it seemed to be providing a welcome update to the Mandarin's rather stereotypical portrayals in the comics. And then the film came out, and hoo boy, did audiences feel duped or what? For starters, Iron Man 3 isn't gritty at all, it's more of a comedy than anything else. And that bait and switch with Trevor, I eat it up, I love it because of how much it annoyed people. On the one hand, it is a troll job that actually cleverly plays into one of the main themes of the movie, manipulating the population through mass consumption media, but it's also the one major MCU trailer switcheroo that left audiences feeling, let's just say, a little bit annoyed. Number 7. Bicentennial Man. With a stonking $100 million budget at stake, Columbia Pictures were clearly worried that they'd got a little bit of a stinker on their hands with this Robin Williams vehicle. Instead of letting the trailers promote the story of an android wishing to be human, they instead decided to dishonestly market the movie as a wacky comedy about an eccentric android. With its use of upbeat music, emphasis on the film's brief comedic scenes, and the name-dropping of "from the director of Mrs. Doubtfire," the outrageously misleading trailer set up casual audiences to be stunned when it turned out that the film was much more of a somber look at mortality than it was slapstick. Unsurprisingly, Bicentennial Man went on to bomb catastrophically at the box office, while Columbia presumably likely threw their hands up in the air and just said, "Oh, why hasn't our trick worked?" Number 6. Hereditary. Sometimes trailers fib in order for their plot not to be spoiled, but that's not exactly the case here, as Hereditary tried not to spoil the main narrative by effectively inventing another one. The trailers focused on protagonist Annie grieving for her recently deceased mother, with the implication being that the mother would return as a malevolent paranormal presence throughout the film. But as it turns out, this was in order to distract us all from the fact that Annie's daughter Charlie, who was featured extensively in the trailers, is brutally killed in a car accident barely 30 minutes into the movie. Footage of her funeral from the film was repurposed in the trailers, with the implication being that it was that of Annie's mother, making the surprise all the more impactful. The trailers also made zero references to the fact that the primary antagonist force is actually a coven rather than a ghost, thereby inverting both of the main selling points of the actual film. Luckily for all involved, it worked a treat with audiences who appreciated the manipulation rather than feeling cheated. Number 5. Serenity. Now, believe it or not, but once upon a time, this Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway starring thriller from Stephen Knight was a buzzed about Oscar contender. That all fell away though when the reviews from the film came out. But if you were reading these reviews, however, you'd feel like the critics were destroying another film, as the trailers that you'd watched showcased an almost tongue-in-cheek murder mystery thriller with an all-star cast, not about a man called Patrick making a video game, with the events shown in the trailer actually being from this self-created title. Nothing in the marketing suggested the film was going in this left-field direction, but it's almost actually a shame, because if they'd leaned into this rather bizarre B-movie plot, then it might have gotten a fair bit more interest. However, instead the studio did what they always do and marketed the film on its traditional sexy thriller elements. Well, at least you can say it wasn't boring. Number 4. Deadpool 2. The trailers for Deadpool 2 were an A+ exercise in toying with audiences in a way that was entertaining while ensuring that they didn't feel shortchanged. The marketing took a heavy focus on the introduction of Deadpool's new superhero team, the X-Force, comprised of Domino, Zeitgeist, Shatterstar, Bedlam, and, well, Peter. And despite the trailers showing the X-Force in action, all of these new heroes, with the exception of Domino, are killed off in the introductory scene, dying in a hilariously brutal series of accidents after they parachute from a helicopter, many before they even reach the ground. Director David Lynch even shot additional footage of the doomed heroes fighting the DMC goons purely for the trailer, to ensure that fans didn't have a hope of figuring out the brilliant gag before it played out on cinema screens. The result was pure hilarity, of course, and became a marketing troll that most fans were more than willing to be a part of. Number 3. Collateral Beauty. Collateral Beauty basically missold itself to audiences. What they were looking for was a sappy middle-brow drama starring a fleet of Oscar-hopeful actors, but what they got, well, it was pretty depressing and horrible. The trailers focused on the anguish of Will Smith's bereaved protagonist, Howard Inlet, who's struggling to cope with his daughter's death, as well as a supernatural element, it seemed, where Howard is visited by the physical manifestations of love, death, and time. But in reality, the film's plot is not this at all. I mean, yes, Smith does lose his daughter, but for 99% of the movie, love, death, and time are not fantastical in the slightest. Rather, they're actually 3 actors hired by Howard's business partners in an attempt to prove that he's mentally ill, by filming him talking to the actors and then digitally removing them. They're doing this in order to sack him from their company and protect their business. Yes, it is as horrible as it sounds, and takes what could be a real tear-jerking premise and turned it into a story about a group of assholes trying to frame a grieving man for money. Outrageously though, the film's ending pulls a double twist to reveal that yes, in fact the 3 actors were love, death, and time all along. Oh, get in the bin. Number 2. The Place Beyond the Pines. The trailers for this fantastic crime thriller revolve around Ryan Gosling's beleaguered protagonist Luke, a motorcycle stuntman who turns to a life of crime in order to provide for his young son. The marketing also played up a terrific ensemble cast, introducing Bradley Cooper as a cop, Avery Cross, and implied that he was chasing Glanton down all over the course of the movie. But The Place Beyond the Pines plot actually plays out very differently. Luke is shot and killed by Cross just 50 minutes into the 140-minute runtime, after which there's a 15-year time jump, and the rest of the film focuses on both Cross's political career and the lives of his and Luke's teenage sons. For audiences drawn to the film largely on the basis of Gosling's presence, it was undeniably misleading for him to be iced at the end of Act 1, but the film is nevertheless so richly compelling that its deception was ultimately well worth it. And number 1, Annapolis. Don't feel bad if you don't remember this 2006 James Franco starring drama, which on the basis of its trailers appeared to be a war film centering on the experiences of a young Navy recruit making his way through basic training. Despite the trailer focusing on harsh boot camp sequences, sexy shots of aircraft carriers, jets, and even explosions, most of the training sequences are shoved into the first 20 or so minutes of the movie because this film is actually a boxing film. Though the trailers only included a single errant shot of people sparring, the film is about as much about training as your mum is about keeping her clothes on after a sniff of gin and a crisp £5 note. In that, it is completely not. And yes, that was my 1 per list. Much of the naval imagery used in the trailers is just stock footage and tricks the audience into thinking that they'll be seeing an action-packed war film. This left many dejected when it turned into a sports movie instead. And it's a pretty predictable one at that. And there we go, those were 10 movie trailers that totally trolled their audiences. I hope that you enjoyed that, my friends. But before you go off and hopefully have a great day, whatever you're getting up to, I just want to say one thing. I hope that you are well, because we've got enough trolls in our lives dealing with us, just feeding negativity everywhere. It's not necessary. So hence I'm using this platform for positivity and just saying, I hope that you are well, because you deserve love, happiness, and success. Each and every one of us does. And don't let anyone tell you any bloody differently, alright? As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me at RetroJ with a 0 over on Twitter. You have been awesome. Never forget that. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye.